We're going to pick up with Isaac today. The second of our four main people in the book of Genesis, right? Genesis 11 through 50 are four main people: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. So we're going to get going with this today. Last week's video that you watched was a review, and I will not have any questions from that on the test, just in case you're wondering about that. He wanders a lot, but to me he's very interesting. I still enjoy him a lot, even if he is very monotonous. So don't even act like you stayed awake through it. So, right? You're like, oh, I don't remember that part. So. Okay. All right, I have a page and a half to 2 pages small, but you know how my stories get going. But I have basically a page and a half to 2 pages on each of these characters. Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. So we'll take a week, one lecture period on each of these. And of course, Abraham lived a very different life than Isaac, who lived a very different type of life than Jacob, who certainly lived a very different type of life than Joseph. They all are very distinct. One of the neat things I love studying about the Old Testament is that you see how different people lived, totally different types of lives, totally different places, etc. And yet, and made all kinds of different mistakes. And the Bible tells us, anybody who doesn't believe the Bible, they say, well, the Bible just kind of covers up for itself. No, it doesn't. It tells us all the bad things about everybody. That's one of the signs that it's true. Because if God was trying to just present this story, this sugar-coated story, he wouldn't tell us the bad things about David and Solomon and, Abraham and Jacob. These guys did some pretty scoundrel things, Jacob especially. My goodness, what a scoundrel. But yet the Bible tells us these things, negative things about them, and some of the lessons they had to learn and the hard things they had to go through because of their sin. The Bible still discusses the consequences of sin. And Jacob, when we get to that next week, he's the lesson on reaping what you sowed. That's the story of his life. You reap what you sow. Isaac's different this way. We're going to cover just 3 chapters today, chapters 25, 26, and 27. Isaac is the son of a famous father, the father of a famous son, and himself is kind of not known that much, even though he lived longer than both of them, Abraham or Jacob. Isaac lived the longest of the 3, but not much is said about him. Let's pray and we'll look at his life today. Thank you, Lord, for this day and the opportunity to study the life of Isaac. I pray, God, that we could have some things that we can learn and apply to our lives today. And we'll pray, God, that especially as we study through the Old Testament, that we'd have a better understanding of it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, chapter 25 of the book of Genesis. God had been promising to Abraham for over 25 years that he would have a seed. Genesis chapter 12, God was very clear, I believe, to Abraham that he would have a seed someday. That seed would be a physical child from him and from Sarah. Not from Abraham and Hagar, but from Abraham and Sarah. Well, when they came into the promised land, for a while, Abraham kind of waffled around, if you will. He doubted a bit. Went to Egypt. Lied about his wife. He doubted, and he didn't completely show that faith in God that he had at Ur the Chaldees, or that he would later on. And so I believe God made him wait for a while longer. But as Romans chapter 4 tells us, that Abraham believed God and it was counted unto him for righteousness. Abraham, even though his body was deemed dead, God used him and Sarah to still at that old age produce a child. What does the name Isaac mean? Laughter. Why was he named Laughter? Sorry for laughing. But yes, because Sarah laughed. But what's another thing, another good reason why he was called Laughter? Remember I told you this the other day. Because they were... Yes. No, sorry. In the back. Hang on. Not Carol. No. What's it start with? Kayla Scrignoli. Yes. Why? Why was he called Laughter?
Because people were laughing.
Yes. I think that's the most... here's this little baby, you got a I didn't know you had a grandchild. Did you adopt that little child? No, this is my son. So I can just imagine that everybody would have laughed when they saw, can you picture, can you picture 90-year-old Sarah pregnant? And Abraham, man, I can't wait, they're happily in love. Oh my goodness. So the Lord had promised this seed. By the way, this seed, this seed is not, I don't believe, the only seed that's mentioned in First or 2 Corinthians, where the Bible talks, in Galatians, where the Bible talks about the seed as of one that was be born, Jesus Christ. God promised to Abraham not just one seed, Jesus Christ, even that was certainly true. He promised to Abraham a seed that would walk on the land that God promised to them. He would cover the land. In other words, he would have a large family. The seed would be a large family. This promise that's made to Abraham was not just the promise of one seed, but the promise of many. The promise of that one seed is a reference to a different passage, I believe, not in Genesis chapter 12. That's a whole different argument that has come up, I think, mostly in recent years. So Isaac is the first fulfillment, right, of that promise. Isaac finally is born when Abraham is 100 and Sarah is 90. Oh, wow, how funny, comical. All right, so Isaac comes along, and so let's get you some notes so that you have something tangible to write down rather than me just rattling away. First of all, we want to look at the promise of the seed continued here in chapter 25. The promise of the seed continued. Isaac is born into a home. Oh, sorry here. No, sorry, I told you that wrong. Isaac has a home. Wow. Isaac has a interesting home of his own. He comes into this family. Look in chapter 25, verse number 1. We'll pick it up. Sorry, not at verse number 1. We'll pick it up at, it's down in the passage a bit. Verse 19, these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac. And Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Padanaram, the sister to Laban the Syrian. So, Isaac marries Rebekah in the previous chapter of chapter 24, which I remember I told you a couple weeks ago that we would come back to this passage and have this very romantic story. Right, girls? For Isaac and how he gets married. So Isaac has a wife, Rebekah. Who is Rebekah? Rebekah is a cousin, basically. It's related to Isaac. There might not be a first cousin. I forget exactly the relation here, but they're definitely related. When the servant in chapter 24, Eleazar, went to Padanaram to find a wife for his master's son. That story, in reality, I think, is a picture, in many ways, of Jesus Christ. And his bride, the Holy Spirit, was sent to the earth to redeem a bride, the church, for the master's son. The master didn't physically see the church until the wedding supper, the supper of the Lamb in the book of Revelations. So the servant was sent to find a wife. Let's go to chapter 24. now to talk about this story a little bit. We find this starting out in towards the beginning of the chapter. Abraham sends him away. Let's not read the whole thing. Look down at verse number 5. The servant said unto him, that's unto Abraham, peradventure the woman will not be willing to follow me unto this land. Must I needs bring thy son again unto the land from whence thou camest? Abraham said to him, beware that thou bring not my son thither again. He has to stay here. Verse 8, if the woman be not willing to follow thee, then thou shalt be clear from this my oath. Only bring not my son thither again. Don't take my son over there. Bring the woman here. Well, let's see if they'll do that. Verse 10, the servant took 10 camels of the camels of his master and departed. For all the goods of his master were in his hand. He arose and went to Mesopotamia into the city of Nahor. By the way, on this map, Nahor is not on here. Padanaram would be way up to the north. They're down here at Hebron and traveling several hundred miles with 10 camels and servants loaded with gold, and that'll come up later, by the way, loaded with gold and jewelry to entice, that's not totally the word to use, to prove to the family that this master's son, who is their relative, they would have remembered them, at least the older folks would remember, because Abraham had gone through there a number of years earlier, 25 years earlier. No, more than that. Wow, about 50 years earlier, 60 years earlier. So anyway, they want to prove that the master can take care of the bride if they'll release the bride. So they head out. Verse number 12, the servant said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master Abraham. Behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city come out to draw water. Let it come to pass that the damsel to whom I shall say, let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink. She shall say, drink. And I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac. Isn't that romantic? Wow. She doesn't see him or anything. She just will show up, and he'll ask her for a drink, and she'll say, sure, have a drink. Then she'll say, do you mind if I give your 10 camels a drink also? Now, what does a camel drink? When they've been, you know what a camel does. They store their water right in the hump in their, isn't that what they do? Yeah. In the hump in their back. Well, anyway, what do they, they're going to drink a lot of water. A camel can go for several days without a drink. And then when they do drink, they drink easily 20 to 30 gallons of water, I've read. They can drink serious water, putting it away, restocking, right? So she's offering them a drink. She knows the work that's involved. So she's going to let down her bucket into the well over and over and over and over again. It'd take hours to give all the camels a drink of water. You know, we're not talking about, you know, I can take this bucket of water and dump it in the trough. They'll all get their drink and we're good to go. It would have taken probably an hour or two at least to give the camels a drink of water. So why did he, was this servant just lazy? Man, I need somebody to do my work for me. Lord, please. What would this say about this woman? I'll let the ladies answer that. She's a hard worker. Thank you. She's a hard worker. She is thinking about others, not just herself. You know, she didn't know she was going to get a husband out of this. She's just working hard. She didn't know that this came, you know, with stipulations of any kind. But the Lord had worked it out. And so, of course, she says exactly what he had thought and prayed that she would. Verse 21, and the man wondering at her, here we go again. Wow, we just heard this in chapel. He held his peace. To wit, whether the Lord had made his journey prosperous or not, came to pass as the camels had done drinking, that the man took a golden earring of half a shekel weight, 2 bracelets of her hand for her hands of 10 shekels weight of gold. Here you go. This is for you. Can we have a place to stay? And they, of course, go to the house of Bethuel. Now, the house of Bethuel, there's two siblings that we know of. The one is, of course, Rebekah, and the other one is a dirty rascal named Laban. Laban is Rebekah's brother. Now, he's a young man here in this story. He's an old man many, many years later. I have a hard time understanding the dates, but it seems to be that it was about 100 years later when Jacob came through looking for a wife. Where we get those numbers from, if you figure out the dates, Jacob was 77 when he left home, when he tricked his father and put the things on his arms and so on. He was 77. Of course, he wasn't born, according to chapter 25, I believe it is, until Isaac and Rebekah had been married for 20 years. So that's 20 plus 77 is 97 years. That Laban, he's over 100 for sure when he has these two daughters who Jacob marries, Laban's daughters, Leah and Rachel. But so what does Laban see? Laban sees money, money, gold, earrings, shekels, many shekels weight of bracelets, and so on. And so later on, it's just hilarious to me to think about. Here comes Jacob, with a knapsack over his back, plodding up there looking for a wife 100 years later. And Laban says, man, I remember that family. They got loads of money. And come on, Jacob, peel it out. And Jacob never can. He doesn't have it. He's broke as a joke, He's a 77-year-old suitor looking for a wife with no money. Unreal. Okay, so let's talk about this. Well, anyway, did I cover everything here with this? Oh, a couple other things with this. When he comes to the house, the servant, they convince Rebekah to go with them. And of course, they convinced the whole family. And it didn't just work that they had to just convince the girl. Her parents had to be convinced and paid for their loss, which is known as the dowry. And so they paid for that, and she was able to leave. Sight unseen, he must be a rich guy. He was. He owned lots of possessions and huge amounts of cattle and everything, many servants. And he would inherit all of the possessions of his father, Abraham. And so she comes, and let's read this very, very romantic part here. The end of chapter 24, verse 62, verse 61. Rebekah arose and her damsels, and they rode upon the camels and followed the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went his way. Isaac came from the way of the well, Lahairoi, Bir Lahairoi. For he dwelt in the south country, that's south of Hebron. It's country, desert. Isaac went out to meditate in the field at the eventide, and he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she lighted off the camel, for she had said unto the servant, what man is this that walketh in the field to meet us? And the servant said, it's him. It's your husband to be. It's your master. My master, sorry. Therefore she took a veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all things that he had done. Isn't that romantic? She quickly covered herself with her wedding veil when she saw him as she's riding her camel. Okay, so what kind of a home is this? Let's now get to our points here. First, number one, underneath the promise of the seed, I want you to note down first that this is a distinguished home. A distinguished home. This is Isaac, the chosen son of Abraham. He's not the only son of Abraham. There's also Ishmael. But Isaac is the chosen son. It's the line that the promise of the seed would come through. Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to Judah and so on down the line. Matthew chapter 1, by the way, clearly identifies that line. Luke chapter 2, I believe it is. 2, 3, I believe it is, also identifies that line. So this is a distinguished home. Isaac is the heir of all of Abraham's wealth. And those possessions and the covenant that God made with Abraham was also passed along to Isaac. Not only is it a distinguished home, it then became a disappointed home. Verses 12 through 23 of chapter 25. They had no children. Verse 20 says, Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padanaram, sister to Laban, the Syrian. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. 20 years after they were married. I forget where the passage is where it says that. But anyway, they waited for 20 years, and then they finally had a child. But it wasn't a child. It was two children, twins, Jacob and Esau. Well, the Lord said unto her, verse 23, and this is very important here, verse 23, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people. Well, who's going to be stronger? Of course, it'll be the older, right? Because it's always passed down to the oldest son. No, the Lord made that very clear. And the elder shall serve the younger. Romans chapter 11 is very clear that in God's sovereignty, he rejected Esau and chose Jacob. Was it because Jacob was such a godly man? No. He became, I believe, more godly later in his life, but he was not a godly man. They were both very fleshly and so on. But God in his sovereignty chose Jacob over Esau. So, of course, they're born. This is a disappointed home. They didn't have a child, and then they got 2 later on. Second or third, we see also this is a divided home. A divided home. Homes were not meant to be divided. You know what I mean? They're meant to be together. They're meant to be on the same page. Father, mother, husband, wife, parents, children. But we see that that's, and brother, children to children, meant to have a good relationship. But it didn't happen here. There's several divisions here in this family. Let's point these out. First, I want you to see that Isaac and Rebekah were divided. Isaac and Rebekah were divided. Anybody remember when that is shown? Josh?
And the favoring of their sons.
Sure, the favoring of their sons. Isaac loved who? Esau. Why? Because he did eat of his venison. He loved that freshly cooked deer meat. Do you like deer meat? Do you? Good, good. No? Has to be in the form of sausage. Oh, that sounds good. Sausage sticks. Wow. Right off our own farm. Best you can put in there. Good seasoning and all. Anyway, Isaac loved Esau because of the venison. What does that mean about Isaac? What does that tell us about Isaac? Help me out. Maybe nothing? Is it fine that Isaac loved Esau and Rebekah loved Jacob, and then they kind of go against each other? Is that fine with you? No? Okay, so what does that tell us about Isaac? Yes? Any ideas?
He did love his children.
Okay, that definitely is part of it. Anybody else? By the way, parents do treat children somewhat differently, and I know what you're thinking. No, they're not supposed to. Well, okay, generally they're not supposed to, but children have different needs. So parents do treat their children somewhat differently. As far as favorites, it shouldn't be the case. Yeah, they're my favorite. No, they're all your children. So, yes, anybody else?
He wasn't only the leader of his home.
Okay, that's true. Yes?
Maybe he didn't discipline Esau as much as Jacob.
Okay, that's possible. If your favorite son is the favorite because of what food he gives you.
I think he's kind of selfish.
Okay. Thank you. You want to keep going on that? He was kind of selfish.
Yeah, because he liked him because of what he could get from his son?
Sure. I've met plenty of people like that, by the way. Older people. Man, my kids, I just recently am thinking of somebody, they were bad-mouthing their own kids, except for one. And the reason they liked the one child is because they would come by and take them places and do stuff with them. Anyway, I'm not saying, I think all kids should help their older parents, but still, if you're just loving one son because of what he can give you, it's kind of selfish. And Isaac, we find in a couple of instances where he's pretty consumed with himself. When he's ready to die, when he thinks he's ready to die, he's not out there trying to make sure his wife is all set. Oh, let me have my favorite meal. Deer meat. That's all he thinks about is himself. You would think he would be kind of concerned to make sure his wife is taken care of. But he doesn't. So Isaac is that way. What about Rebekah? What do we know about her?
She was kind of scheming.
Scheming. Okay. She schemed with Jacob to try to make sure that he got the birthright. By the way, Jacob was supposed to get the birthright, right? He was supposed to get the blessing. He was the oldest. Why didn't Isaac recognize that? Do you think he knew? Surely he knew. So then he's going to give it to Esau anyway? I don't know. I don't know. I've often felt like Isaac is pretty fleshly. Isaac is pretty selfish. I'm going to pass this along to my oldest son, no matter what. And Rebekah then becomes kind of scheming against her own husband with her son to try to manipulate. It doesn't seem like a very good home, does it? A divided home between the parents. How about the parents and the kids? Here's Jacob deceiving his own father, right? That's not a very good relationship. Here's Esau wanting to kill Jacob, his brother. Okay? I felt like that a few times growing up, with my brothers. No, I didn't. Not that bad. I remember being really angry at my brothers, but I never got to this point. And I had lots of brothers to get mad at. 6 of them. So it's a divided home. They were also different. This is very basic, but Jacob and Esau are very different in their appearances. Take good notes, man. That'll help you stay awake a little bit better. They were different in their appearances. How did Jacob look? Right? Sorry? Like a mama's boy? I'm saving Josh for the next question. Jacob the Bible describes him very clearly as a smooth man. And that doesn't mean suave and sappy. That means he had no hair on his arms, his neck, etc. Esau, on the other hand, Josh, would you like to describe Esau a little bit?
He was very hairy.
Very hairy. And what color was his hair? No, kidding. He had red hair. By the way, Esau established the country, his family of Edom. The word Edom, as you can imagine, is very similar to the word Adam. What is Adam? The Hebrew name for Adam means red soil, red dirt. Edom means red dirt. The country of Edom is down to the south here. On this map, it'd be down here in these mountains. Petra. You ever heard of the old city of Petra? That's the capital of Edom. You remember reading about that in your book. Red rocks. It's red mountainous rock. So it's pretty interesting, the name meanings that fit with that. So anyway, so Esau was hairy. By the way, he was very hairy. Very hairy. Literally, if you felt a goat and the skin, the coarse, rough hair of a goat, it felt very similar to Esau's neck. and arms. So, I didn't used to believe in Bigfoot, but now I do. So, Esau was that way, but Jacob, even though he was a smooth, not so hairy man, the Bible describes him as a heel tripper, a supplanter. From the very earliest, the first time he was ever seen, when he was being birthed, he was grabbing the heel of the firstborn to try to beat him. He always wanted to beat his brother. It's the way he was made. He's a heel tripper. That's literally what that means. He wanted to be the first. He wanted to beat his brother. He's a supplanter. The Bible describes in verse 26 as a plain. No, it's not verse 26. 27. Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. All right. One more thing here concerning the differences in this home. They had differing appreciations or differing desires. What did Jacob like?
Stay inside his tents and cook.
I noticed that you didn't admire that when you were saying that, right? He liked to be inside and cook with his chef's hat on and flipping, stuff and catching it in his hat. And I'm kidding, but he was an indoors man. Esau, on the other hand, loved to be in the outdoors, and he wanted to be out in the world. But more than that, Jacob wanted to have the invisible inheritance. Well, okay, he wanted money too, but he wanted to have the actual birthright and the blessing. So at least give Jacob credit there that he wanted things that he couldn't have now, but that he knew were valuable later on. Esau, on the other hand, didn't care about the things he could have later on that were valuable but invisible, and he wanted what he could have to stuff his face right now. I mean, if it's Kentucky Fried Chicken, he had to have it. Whatever it was, he had to stuff his stomach with food right now because he was so hungry he was about to die. That's what he said. I hope you don't believe that. He said, if I don't get this to eat right now, I'm going to die. Oh, Esau, I think you'll be just fine for a little while longer. Okay, so those are some differences. They were very different. What an odd home. They're twins, but yet they're so opposite. They're husband and wife, Isaac and Rebekah, but yet they're so divided. And so this is not a great home to be a part of. Secondly, so that's the promise of the seed continued in chapter 25. Now I want to talk about the promise of the land confirmed. Chapter 26. Starts out in verse 1. And there was a famine in the land. So we're talking about the land now. What's going to happen? This is the land that God has given to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. So is it going to remain yours? What are you going to do with it? What's going to happen to it? Well, Isaac finds out real quickly that this land that he's been promised comes with problems. There's a famine in the land. There's Philistines in the land. And what do Philistines like to do in this chapter? Huh? No. The Philistines weren't like that at this time. That's a later group of Philistines. Oh, that's true, certainly. You're not thinking of the chapter, I can tell. They like to come and fill up the wells. What are they doing? The Philistines wanted to control the land for themselves, and they didn't want outsiders, Abraham's family, coming in here and controlling what they considered to be their land. By the way, Philistines also dug wells. In those days, in order to exist, you had to have wells. I should have brought some pictures of some wells. At Beersheba, beer, B-E-R, that part of it doesn't mean what you think it means. It does not mean what you think it means. Beer is not a drink there. It means a well. It's a Hebrew word for it. The well of the oath. Beer laheroi. I almost said there's other kinds of beer. There's other names for beer. None of them sound right, do you? But at Beersheba, there was a well right outside the original tell where the city of Beersheba was. And it's really neat. That well goes back, it goes back thousands of years. We don't know if it's the well that Isaac, was it Isaac? Yes, I believe it was. That Isaac made this covenant with the people there at Beersheba, with the Philistines over at Beersheba. But we do know that that well is a very old well, and it's very, very, very deep still. Thankfully, it was blocked off, but we dropped stones down in the well, and it was probably 3, 4, 5 seconds before you heard anything at the bottom. It was down there quite a ways. We found we came across some other wells. What's the name of that place? Gerar, I believe it was, which is also a Philistine city from the time of Abraham. Remember those little pottery pieces I had in here? Those come from Gerar. And there was also a very, very ancient well there. In order to exist, you have to have wells in this part of the country. There's very little rainfall, there's very little water supply, etc. In the 1940s, the man who basically liberated the land of Israel and established Israel as its own country again, Ben-Gurion, he, I forget his first name. Anyway, but after he gained the independence for the state of Israel, and he retired from, this is about 20 years later, probably in the 1960s, 1970s, when he retired to his ranch, he found a place way down south in this area somewhere. And we were there. I just forget exactly where it was, but it was somewhere down towards Beersheba, down that direction. And he built his own property there. It's totally desert until he got there. And he dug wells, and he figured out how to pump the water out, obviously. And they get it's about a half an inch to an inch of rain per year down in this area. And he figured out how to save every last bit of rain that falls. Anyway, when we were there and we went to his tomb and so on, the whole area around there for probably 40, 50 acres is as green as can be. Green as can be. They pump the water out. They put down fresh dirt. They water it every day. There was all kinds of wildlife all over the property there. I have pictures of ibex and other kinds of wild goats and so on like that around there. An amazing place. And anyway, we're driving over through the hills of around Hebron and the wilderness, whatever. I mean, just really hilly, and all brown and completely barren. You come over the hill and you just see this little green spot, the oasis, and everything's totally green there. It was really a neat thing to see. But that's, if you can understand it, that can be done. And that's the kind of thing that Abraham did, was he established his own oasis. Dug wells, pumped the water out. They're an absolute must. You have to have those wells in order to exist in this area. So, three things. Excuse me, that I want to point out here in chapter 26 that Isaac does. First, in chapter 26, because of the famine, Isaac faced his father's temptation. Isaac faced his father's temptation because of the famine. Remember when Abraham had a famine in the land? What did Abraham do? He went to Egypt because there's always food in Egypt, right? Because of the Nile River. Well, Isaac was faced with this temptation. Does he leave or does he stay? Well, he didn't go all the way to Egypt, but he did go to the land of the Philistines. We find Isaac going to Gerar. he went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar, and the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in this land, sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee. So he was faced with his father's temptation to go down to Egypt. He did not. What did he do? When he went to Gerar, secondly, he repeated his father's sin. He repeated Abraham's sin. Well, the king of Gerar says, man, he had a harem of wives. He had many wives. So, hey, if there's another pretty woman coming into town, think about that. Here's Rebecca. She's got to be in her 50s or something. And of course, when Sarah was called this pretty woman, she was almost 90. Oh my goodness. These kings had lots of issues. So Isaac goes to Gerar, and the king of Gerar, of course, he's a Philistine. Much earlier version of the Philistines, not nearly as into war and so on like that as the later Philistines would be. But the Philistine king tries to take her as his wife. And Isaac, defending himself, says, why don't you just tell them that you're my sister? Now, by the way, when Abraham said that, it was a half-truth. Abraham's wife Sarah was his half-sister. So he could actually say, she's my sister, and it kind of be, she's more than a sister. But I'm just saying, it's kind of a half-truth. Now this is a full-out lie. She's not his sister, she's his cousin. And of course, God rebukes and spares that. Now, what's the big deal about that? God again protects the seed. What if she'd have been taken in and conceived a child from a Philistine king? Boy, that would have been a mess to try to clean up. So anyway, it's just a big problem here that God again averts. Third then, he also does a third thing in this land. He digs out his father's wells. Genesis 26, verse 12. He digs out his father's wells. The Philistines had filled in Abraham's wells. Look at verse 15. For all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with earth. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, Go from us, for thou art much mightier than we. He departed thence and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar, and dwelt there. And Isaac digged again the wells of water which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father. They found a well of springing water, verse 19 says. They have a couple other run-ins. Look down at verse 25. He builded an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants digged a well. And they finally make an agreement in verse 33 at Beersheba that they would stay out of the Philistines' territory and they would mind their own business, pretty much staying to their own selves. And Beersheba was the well of the oath, where they made this oath at a well. So he dug his father's wells up again, cleaned them out, and had several run-ins with the Philistines about wells. But God took care of him and preserved the land for Isaac. That's the point. Next, we want to look at, in chapter 27 now, the promise of the blessing committed. The promise of the blessing committed. Now this is, of course, the story of Isaac passing on the blessing to Abraham. To Jacob rather than to Esau, on accident, of course. All right, we've mentioned a few things already about Esau. Esau was very impulsive. Esau wanted to have things now, and anything that was valuable, it didn't matter to him as long as he could get what he wanted now. And so Jacob, on several occasions, takes advantage of him, of Esau. All right, let's give you some thoughts here underneath this in chapter 27. First, we're going to see the declining father. The declining father. Here in chapter 27, and I don't see where it's listed as far as the age. It's written somewhere else of the age of Isaac at this point. Oh no, it is in this chapter, and I don't remember where it is. I just remembered that it is in this chapter, though. His age. Oh well, we'll come across it. Isaac is 137 years old in this chapter. 137. He says, I'm going blind, and I'm about to die. Which, by the way, when Jacob leaves, remember? When Jacob does what he does and Esau says, I'm going to kill you, Jacob leaves. Jacob's gone for how many years? Huh? From home. No, it's not 40 years. No, it's not 14. But you're closer. No. You don't know. Is that what that means? Remember, 7 years working for the first wife. 7 years working for the second wife. And then he was supposed to go 7 more years that he had kind of committed, I'll stay here. But he didn't finish out the 7 years, he stayed for 6 more. So it's a total of 20 years. When Jacob comes back home, Isaac is still alive. I thought you were about to die, you know? And by the way, he would live for 23 more years after Jacob was home. So Isaac lived for 43 years after this, when he thought, I'm about to die. Isaac lived to be 175 years old. And he's only 137 now. So he has a long way to go still. It makes me want, I'm assuming he was probably blind for a good part of that. Because he was blind by this, obviously, already. All he had to go on was his sniffer and his feelers, right? Oh, man. All right, so we have a declining father. Let's point out a couple things about Isaac here. These are negative things. First, Isaac is impatient. Isaac is impatient. He's wanting to give away this blessing, and he's not, you know, I guess you can't tell when you're about to die. He doesn't know that he's not actually going to die yet. But he's giving away this blessing when he's only 137, has a long time of life still ahead. I think he's jumping the gun here. Secondly, definitely is this sin of unbelief. Unbelief. God had very clearly instructed them who was supposed to serve whom. The elder shall serve the younger. Esau is going to serve Jacob. And what happens? Isaac tries to give it to Esau. The blessing, by the way, the blessing and the birthright are two separate things. They're connected, but they're two separate things. Both of them should go to the oldest son. The oldest son being Esau by a few minutes. Both of them should have gone to Esau. The birthright is that portion of goods of the father passed down to the sons. If you have Isaac and he has only 2 sons, all of his goods are not split evenly, down the middle. There's actually, all of the goods of the father would be split 3 ways. So you're going to give 2 portions. Well, it ended up going 2 portions to Jacob and only 1 portion to Esau. So Esau ended up receiving 1/3 of his father's inheritance, and Jacob ended up receiving 2/3. That's the birthright, the privilege of being the firstborn, getting these material possessions. But the blessing was a spiritual blessing that was started in Genesis chapter 12 the blessing of the seed, the blessing of the land. Okay, these are the spiritual blessings. And Isaac wanted to give that to Esau. Well, I'm sorry. That had been very clearly stated that that was supposed to go to Jacob, not to Esau. And so there's a big mistake. He's, I think, very guilty of unbelief here, not following the Lord's will. Third, Isaac is also carnal. Carnal. He is depending on his flesh. He's fleshly. Can I have some deer meat? I want something to make me happy. I want to please myself. Men, don't we love to eat? It's not fair. The ladies, as they're cooking, they pretend like they don't eat while they're cooking, But we know the truth. Making cookies and, good hot cookies are being consumed while you're doing the work. Or fresh cookie dough, as some of you like to do. Anyway, but we do like to eat. So there's the declining father. Secondly, there's a doubting mother. A doubting mother. She says, oh no, I heard Isaac say he's going to give away the blessing to Esau. That can't happen. That's not supposed to happen. We have to do something about this. We have to manipulate things so that we can make sure the blessing goes to the right son. Look what she does in verse number 5 of chapter 27. And Rebekah heard when Isaac spake to Esau his son. And Esau went to the field to hunt for venison to bring it. And Rebekah spake unto Jacob her son, saying, Behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, Bring me venison. Verse 8, Now therefore, my son, obey my voice. By the way, Jacob here is 77 years old. He's 77 years old. Okay, we know that from a number of other passages, and putting the dates and the times together, he's 77 years old. Hear, obey my voice, according to that which I command thee. Oh, wow. Yes, mother. Go now to the flock and fetch me from thence 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth, and thou shalt bring it to thy father that he may... she got this plan hatched and carried out instantly. She's a conniver and a deceiver, a schemer. Wow, no wonder Jacob also had some skills at deceiving and lying and coming up with quick schemes. Hey, I don't know if I'd have even thought of this. And then Jacob says, but Dad's going to hear my voice. He's going to feel my arms. He'll smell that I don't smell as stinky as Esau does. He'll know it right away that I'm not Esau. And Mom Rebecca says, yeah, but you're going to take the skins of the goats and put them on your arms. They'll feel just like Esau. Put it around your neck. You ever skinned an animal? The inside of it's nice and bloody, especially when it's fresh. Wrap that around your neck. And so in here comes Jacob with these things on him. And I'm sure Rebecca, in the meanwhile, is cooking the meat and getting it ready. And Jacob, she's helping her son deceive her husband. Yeah, he's an old goat. He'll never know. Oh, man. I don't know. My parents are pretty close. And they never, I don't ever remember my mom saying to any of us, she definitely never said to me, Dad, he's getting pretty dumb, he's getting old. Just ignore what he says. That never happened. Okay? And, we're all grown and gone. I'm pretty sure I could ask any of my siblings, and that never happened. My dad never said, yeah, Mom's a little, just ignore her. She talks a lot, just leave her. That didn't happen. This is a divided home. This is a problem. And so these sons, my goodness, what a way to raise sons, thinking that, knowing that Dad and Mom aren't on the same page, you can play the one to get the other. manipulating them. And it's being instigated by mom. So this is that doubting mother, Rebecca. By the way, Jacob leaves home. He's gone for 20 years. When he gets home again, Isaac's still alive. Rebecca is long gone. He never sees his mother again. She dies while he's away. Third, let's talk about the deceiving son, Jacob. Okay, here's where I have some numbers for you. You can jot these down if you like. You say, well, how old was Jacob? I said he was 77. Well, I'll give you some thoughts here. Jacob was 130 years old when he got to Egypt. Remember when he went to Egypt? After Joseph had been there for 22 years. How old was Joseph when Jacob came to Egypt? This is Jacob. He was 130. Joseph, at that same time, was 39. So, Jacob was he was 91. Jacob was 91 when Joseph was born. Okay? He was 91. Well, when was Joseph born? That's the question, really. Well, Joseph is one of the last of the sons born, right? Joseph was born as that's Benjamin, was born as they were coming back into the land. Joseph was born in Padanaram, along with 10 other brothers in about 4 or 5 years. Okay? His family exploded. It's the only way to say that. Okay? Jacob married Leah after 7 years. 1 week later, he married Rachel as well. Bible says that. And then he had to work for 7 more years to pay for what he already got. Okay? So now, in 1 week, he gets 2 wives. And during these next 7 years is the time when all of his sons are born except Benjamin, Benoni. So, he has 11 sons. Assuming that Joseph, being the youngest of the 11, Joseph was probably born 14 years after Jacob left home. Does that make sense? So, and this 14 years earlier than 91 is 77. Does that make sense? So that's where we get the number 77 from. June. Okay, any questions on that? So, Jacob is a 77-year-old man. He's 91 when Joseph is born, minus 14 years of service to Laban up to that point. All right, what did Jacob do in this story that we're talking about? He listened to his mother and not God. There's a time to listen to your mother, young men. There is a time to listen to your mother. But I think I'm safe to say that it's not when you're 77 years old. Right? Last year I had John Leach here in my class. So, if you expect John Leach to listen to his mother, and then you can expect Jacob to listen to his, but he did. Yes, Mom. Also, Jacob was full of, well, we know this, it's obvious, but Jacob was full of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. Literally, the word hypocrisy has to do with living 2 lives. What did Jacob do? He pretended to be Esau by covering himself up and putting goat skins upon himself to make him stink like Esau. You don't believe me? I'll show it to you in a little bit. And then he's actually, of course, Jacob. He's living a double life here in this story. Hypocrisy. He says at least 3 lies in this story. In verse 19, he says, I am Esau, thy firstborn. Oops. He also says, I have done as thou badest me. Actually, he didn't do. His mom did it. The Bible says that. And he didn't have venison. He had goat. Okay, so he's using a goat to deceive his father. And then he also, the third lie is that he said he called it venison when it wasn't venison, it was goat meat. So 3 lies at least. You can probably find a couple more. Jacob was a liar. He had a cereal problem, not the kind of food you eat, cereal. He had a serial problem with lying and deceiving people. He loved to trick people and get out of it for himself what he could. Which is the crazy thing about deceiving people. When you deceive somebody to get something, you might get it. You might get it. You might get your way. You might get what you originally wanted. But I guarantee you, according to the Bible and according to seeing it happen many, many, many times, experience, you'll never come out on top. And the things that we're going to see Jacob using to deceive his father, his sons someday are going to come along and deceive him. I mean, it is unbelievable with the very same things. He takes a goat, kills the goat, skins it. What do his sons do? They take a goat. The Bible says it calls it the same thing. It's a kid of the goats. They killed the kid of the goats, take the clothing of that of Joseph, the coat of many colors, dip it in that blood and show it to their father. And they use a kid of the goats to deceive their father. There's many parallels like that. You reap what you sow. That's the story of Jacob. So he lies. Also concerning Jacob, note down that sin always finds him out. As much as Jacob lies and cheats and deceives, and we'll cover this in more detail, that comes back to him from his sons and from his uncle Laban. His mother Rebekah's brother is Laban, and of course, he will marry 2 of his first cousins. Right? Laban's daughters, where are we at? I forget where, here we go. Rebekah and Laban are brother and sister. Laban has 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel, and he marries his mother's brother's children, which is his first cousins. So, and by the way, he'd never seen them before. So it wasn't like he grew up with, playing in a little wagon with his cousins and then he ends up marrying them someday. He had never seen them until he was 77 years old. Another thing, how old were they? Were they his age? Probably not close. I think that's pretty... They had lots of children. They had numerous children pretty quickly. At least Leah did. So they were probably in their 20s. Or younger. It's very possible that they were younger. So, Leah was the old goat. She was, it says she was older. And he wanted to get her off his hands, She needed to get married before the younger one could get married. So maybe she was in her, late 20s. So anyway, it's hard to say, but certainly they would not have been anywhere close to his age. That's pretty normally accepted. What does that also mean about Laban? He probably had a younger wife. He probably had numerous wives. And he had a younger wife that had these 2 daughters. So there were many, obviously having polygamy was very common, as it was with Jacob. Okay. Now, 4th, we talked about the father, the mother, Jacob. Now let's talk about Esau, the despairing brother. The despairing brother. Oh, here comes poor Esau, knocking on the door of the tent, right? Isn't that suspense? I've always loved this story. The suspense is Jacob. Can you picture Jacob as he's in there and trying to trick his father and telling lie after lie, and his father is like, "Oh, son." And he starts praying, the God of Abraham. Well, he didn't say Isaac and Jacob because Jacob was right there. But, please may the ground give of its fruit. And Jacob's thinking, Dad, hurry up. I got to get out of here before Esau shows up. And he's praying away and everything you can imagine. He's saying, I can just imagine the suspense. Underneath that goat hair, he's sweating profusely. And finally, his dad gets done. Wow, get me out of here. Rip off this goat hair and cool off and breathe again. And here comes Esau along with his venison meat, the real stuff. And Jacob, runs for cover because he knows he's in huge trouble. Let's see what, as soon as I said I was going to prove it to you. Look at verse 27. Here's Jacob in the tent with his father. And he came near and kissed him. Oh, no, all right, back in verse 26. And his father Isaac said unto him, Come near now and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment and blessed him and said, See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord hath blessed. That is the smell of work and sweat. And I am sure Esau had that great body odor smell. And when he put on this, isn't that funny though? Here's Jacob wearing goat skins. And he says, man, it smells just like Esau, covered with work. So, oh yes, smelled like the boys' dorm, right? Okay, maybe not. All right, so this despairing brother. What happens when Jacob finally gets out of the tent? And here comes Esau, verse 34. And when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry, and said to his father, Bless me, even me also, my father. And he said, Thy brother came with subtlety, and hath taken away thy blessing. And he said, Is not he rightly named supplanter, deceiver, heel tripper? For he hath supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright. He tricked me into that. I was hungry, but he tricked me. Yeah. Remember that sermon on Sunday night? Who's he blaming for his problems? That dirty brother of mine. And he hath taken away my birthright, and behold, now he hath taken away my blessing. And he said, Hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? And Isaac answered unto Esau, Behold, I have made him thy Lord, and all his brethren have I given to him for servants, and with corn and wine have I sustained him. What shall I do now unto thee, my son? Better go hunting more. And Esau said to his father, Hast thou but one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. And Isaac said, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. You're going to have a nomadic lifestyle, living under the sun and the dew of the heavens at night. You're going to live in a nomadic lifestyle. By thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass, and thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing. Time to send him away. Verse 46, Rebekah said to Isaac, Time to trick her husband again. I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth, the Hittites, living in the land. If Jacob take a wife of the daughters of Heth, such as these which are of the daughters of the land, what good shall my life do me? Send him away. She told Jacob in verse 43, Flee thou to Laban my brother, to Haran, and tarry with him a few days until thy brother's fury turn away. So Isaac sends Jacob away. But we see this despairing brother Esau, he was sorry too late for what he lost. So what did Esau do? We find in the next chapter what Esau's response is. Look at chapter 28, the beginning of the chapter, when Jacob gets sent away to find a good wife from the family of Abraham. Verse 6, Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Padan-aram to take him a wife from thence. Verse 7, and that Jacob obeyed his father and his mother and was gone to Padan-aram. 77-year-old Esau, he says, I'm going to find me a wife too. But I'm going to find one of the daughters of Heth, the daughters of the Canaanites here in the land. And I'm going to take one of them because my parents aren't happy with those women. I'm going to find one that irritates the fire out of my parents. And so he got him a wife of the daughters of Heth. Well, of the Canaanites. Then went Esau unto Ishmael and took unto it the wives which he had, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebajoth, to be his wife. So he went and got some more wives to irritate his parents. So that's the despairing brother. Isaac, what a man, what a life. Not a very happy life. A divided home, an unhappy family, a bad relationship with his wife, a bad relationship with his sons. He raised selfish, fleshly sons because he himself was fleshly and selfish. And so not a good situation at all. Jacob, what a conniving creep for years. And it'll be many years from now even before he changes his life, before his life kind of changes and we see better things come of it. It's a sad life to me, of the life of Isaac. Some blessings, not many. All right, we'll dismiss there and we'll pick up with the story of Jacob, the life of Jacob in our next class period.